Hi, writers. I'm Tia Lindstrom. This is the Working Writer Podcast, episode number 2. Today's episode is going to focus on corporate copywriting, and the companion guide that pairs with it focuses on writer's block and perfectionism, which wasn't something I saw coming. I was focused on blocks and the kinds of things that creatives run into when we can't produce, and I stumbled on perfectionism as the evil little root that blocks us in the first place. It's a little bit calling my own bluff because in podcasting, I'm new and I'm still working out the kinks. And I'm a perfectionist, and it is very challenging to let go of some control and some perfectionism and hold on to these episodes and keep making takes and edit out bloopers when in fact I really just want to be natural, I want to be warm, and I want to engage with other people on the topic of writing. Perfectionism's not really allowed or I'll never get these episodes out the door. And that's the point. So I will be practicing what I preach as I explore perfectionism in this episode. So one of the other things that I want to do on every episode of the podcast is share a little bit about what keeps me going, what inspires me, gets my mind thinking. So this book here, you have probably heard of, Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott. It is a classic for writers. There's good reasons why this is a classic. Anne is the person who coined the phrase shitty first drafts. It's worth knowing what that phrase means if you don't know anything else about how to write a book. Learn how to write a shitty first draft. Perfectionism. Perfectionism is the voice of the oppressor, the enemy of the people. It will keep you cramped and insane your whole life, and it is the main obstacle between you and a shitty first draft. I think perfectionism is based on the obsessive belief that if you run carefully enough, hitting each stepping stone just right, you won't have to die. The truth is that you will die anyway, and that a lot of people who aren't even looking at their feet are going to do a whole lot better than you and have a lot more fun while they're doing it. Besides, perfectionism will ruin your writing, blocking inventiveness and playfulness and life force. These are words we get to use in California. Perfectionism means that you try desperately not to have so much mess to clean up. But clutter and mess show us that life is being lived. Clutter is wonderfully fertile ground. You can still discover new treasures under all those piles. Clean things up, edit things out, fix things, get a grip. Tidiness suggests that something is as good as it's going to get. Tidiness makes me think of held breath of suspended animation, while writing needs to breathe and move. That last line makes me think of toddlers and how they have to move around a lot. And when we grow up, we learn to stand still, perform. That's another wild hair I've been thinking about lately is performative self-betrayal. What do we do? Who do we say no to when we're performing for someone else? I write a lot about trauma. One of the major themes in my upcoming memoir is religious trauma, domestic violence, developmental trauma. Perfectionism is a trauma response. It's something that people who've been through trauma learn to do because not being perfect or not being enough, not being good enough has had some big, nasty consequences. It formed us and it shaped us. It shuts down our inventiveness and our playfulness because we can't take the risk of showing the real self. What happens if we do that? So we box it all up, we tidy it all up, we put it away. Guess what? We're blocked. Now we can't make anything. That's writer's block. That's creative block. You're stuck when you're in a box. You're not free. You can't explore. You can't be true to yourself. You're performing and people pleasing. It's near and dear to my heart to let this podcast be whatever it's going to be. It isn't going to be perfect. It can't be. I can't let it be perfect. I can't sit here and agonize over how to edit every single flaw out. I can't take a million takes. I have to let it be what it's going to be. As an introvert, I have to face the scary interviews with the really wonderful people that are always so rewarding. These conversations are so good. I have 20 episodes planned. Almost all 20 of them are recorded. They have all been beautiful experiences. Perfectionism would have stopped it. I would have not even gotten to the email to invite them. So if you're struggling with perfectionism, I feel your pain. I understand. We all go through it. I wrote about it. I hope it's helpful to you. It's in the companion guide that pairs with this episode. As I said before, the books and the podcasts both can be taken independently or they can work together in tandem. They're meant to complement one another. I hope they're helpful. If they're not, I'm probably going to make them anyway because I'm having a blast. It's so much fun doing this. I've wanted to do it for a really long time, and it's been really rewarding to go through this process, every single stage of it, and learn everything that needs to go into place in order to pull this off. It's been really rewarding. It's been really enlightening, and I'm sure it will be useful to me. Oh, I have to tell you about the giveaway. Okay, so at the beginning of every episode, I'm going to show you something I'm giving away. At the end, I'll tell you who won it. The way you win it is by liking a post on Instagram or subscribing to the podcast, subscribing on YouTube, signing up for the newsletter. You have to be somehow interacting with Working Writer Podcast. So today's giveaway is going to be The Business of Being a Writer by Jane Friedman. This book is full of the goods. Jane's awesome. She's a rock star. She used to be the editor of Writer's Digest. She's a fantastic consultant. I say that from experience. This book is chock full of all the cash register, behind the scenes stuff you need to know besides writing the book. It's great when you write the book, but then there's a whole bunch more you have to have in your packet if you're going to query agents or just market yourself, even despite what kind of publishing path you choose. So I didn't start out as a corporate copywriter. I evolved into one. Most of the people that I know who are in copywriting also evolved into copywriting. They didn't start out that way. As one of the points that Kita will make in her long career, being a writer and having subsets and designations of what kind of writer you are is kind of a new thing in the corporate world. It used to be a much more broad category. You had writers, and writers had to write everything. Now they're getting into specialties, which makes it a lot more effective when you have to produce a lot of different things across a lot of different platforms. Corporate copywriting has been a very dynamic shift in my career. And one of the first things I learned about it was how to pare down what I was trying to say, how to be more direct, and how to get rid of perfectionism. There's no time in a corporate setting to nitpick. Anytime you see a creative project in a corporate setting being nitpicked, it's not moving. It's not going forward. And in the corporate world, that translates to sales really fast. So the pressure rises immediately to get things out the door. Today's episode features more than one guest. I actually have a whole team of corporate copywriters, near and dear to my heart because I just spent a year of my life working closely with them, day in, day out, and then we had COVID and we spread out, and then at the end of this year, we all got laid off, along with a lot of other people from a place we're going to refer to as the company. Contracts end, positions end. There's a lot of rollover in this industry. There's also a lot of job opportunity. So one of the things we're going to talk about is how to find a corporate copywriting job, how we all got into it, what it's like on the day-to-day to work on a team. You want writing to be your 9-to-5, but you aren't quite sure how to do it. Copywriting is one of those ways. It can be lucrative. A full-time gig with a corporation pays well. It can be contract, it can be freelance, or it can be full-time with benefits. You can have a day job crafting messaging for companies. We just did it. We had a blast doing it. We got to know each other really well, and we call each other the copycats. I'm going to let you wait until the end of the episode to find out why we're called the copycats, but it's fun. It's a fun story. Who wants to tell how we all met?
I think this should be Kita.
Yeah,
How
I have to agree.
I got nominated. Okay. So, I was approached by a recruiter to consider a position with the company. The position was sold as a UX person because they were starting their account manager program or revitalizing it. and with the idea that there could potentially be more writers that came on board across marketing. And that was it. And the role was UX, writing, some marketing, and then like mentorship for the writers that were currently there. Like that was the way it was advertised to me. I wasn't working in UX, which is what I love to do. So I was like, why not take the leap? I was in internal communications at a major bank financial institution. So I get to the company and Tyler is already in place and writing for the company. And there was another writer who was stationed in New York City, kind of like out left field by himself. No one really knew him. And I think at that point, Tyler was kind of mentoring him. They kind of wanted everything, wanted us to handle everything. So it wasn't really a UX role. It was oh, great, you write. Here's all the stuff we need. The three of you can handle it. And while you're at it, since you have some managerial experience, can you just help manage the two writers? And then so I'll let Skylar, I don't even say I'll let Tyler take it away, and then I guess I can jump back in to then tell how the rest of the game came.
Yeah, so I'd been on the team at the company for a year, I want to say, when Keita joined, and that was the second part of my introduction to copywriting. I joined right out of college. I was working at the local airport in retail for a while, and I can't even remember how I first heard of the company, but I didn't even know copywriting was a thing at the time. But I thought, well, I'm a writer. I went to school for writing, so let me give it a shot. And started writing for client-facing websites, and then switched to a team that was more internal communications, and been doing it ever since. And really enjoy it. And
So should I tell?
or do you?
Skylar was Tia, you were the.
I was next.
Oh yeah, sequential order. That makes sense. Yeah.
So we realized that, okay, so in between all of this transition and kind of figuring out like who does what and where everything is, Tyler was bringing me up to speed on like all things the company. And there were so many components. It was like a lot. And thankfully, Tyler was like, okay, this is what you do in these instances. This is how this works. Here's our guide, what we have in place right now. But amidst all this, my other person on the team was kind of falling apart, right? Well, he was falling apart before all of this happened. So we were trying to figure out what was going to happen with him, and I was getting pressure to get rid of him, but I had literally been there maybe 2 weeks. So it was a tough position, and then we started talking about the other brands, because at the time I think Tyler was working across all the brands, but mainly on web. And then that all was handled by this other writer, which no one knew, and they were kind of trying to like funnel him out, right? So they're like, we need to build the team out. We have all this work coming down the pipeline, and since you're here, you can go ahead and start vetting writers for this process. Mind you, I'm contract, so that's just the funny spin. So I interviewed, and I found Tia. So
Yeah, because that recruiter, I was on the job hunt. And I had applied for an anonymous company that, I didn't know who it was for or anything until I talked to them. And I interviewed, and then it took I don't know, almost 2 full months to get me hired, because the person who had to greenlight it was out of the country for a month in the Mediterranean. He's gone now. We're all gone now. But yeah, so then I came on, and very quickly you guys were talking about adding more, because I guess they had that pod model where they wanted a writer for every brand, and we had more than enough work for that. So then Laura came.
I think, Tia, didn't you remark we could be siblings during your interview?
I think I probably did. I was like, "There's another ginger in the room."
Yeah,
It was either your mom or your sister.
yeah. I remember that. I was like, I was thinking it, but I wasn't going to say it, so I'm glad you did.
Yeah, that was cool. I interviewed with like 5 people at the table, and I had my back to the wall, and so I had all the rest of you on the other side, and it was like, whoa, this is a little full force because
So was it intimidating?
um it was, but it was also like instant rapport. I felt like I clicked really quickly with everybody, so that was really affirming that I was barking up the right tree. Yeah,
So
and then
shortly after Tia joined, I was getting pressure. A lot of work was coming down the pipeline, and we were in the process of resurfacing another brand. And this third brand was kind of like put by the wayside for quite some time. And with all the work from the other 2 brands, there was no way that we could handle it all. And I was still being pulled away for another project, right? So I was asked to bring another person on board, and we needed to do it quickly. So through the pool that I already had, I vetted I think 2 or 3 people, and through that, we found Laura.
Yeah. And I had worked freelance for the brand a couple of years ago, and worked with the brand manager for the new brand of the company. And before, many years ago, I'm trying to not say anything.
right.
So, so, yeah, the recruiter reached out to me. I was technical writing for a major insurance company, and it was so dry, hated it. And I jumped at the opportunity, and realized that I'd be working with the same person that I was working with before. And I was like, yeah, let's do this. So there's that.
You worked at the company before?
I worked I worked as a freelancer for the company.
I never knew that.
Yep.
So that was one of the selling points. We needed like quick ramp up, and I'm like, whoever comes on is gonna have to like really learn the product and how to work with the team that they're with. And so oddly enough, when her resume came across the table, I was like, oh, okay, she's worked here before. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? And I think I reached out to the person that she had worked with, and they're like, oh yeah, no, it's great. You can definitely use her. I'm like, okay, perfect. Move her to the top of the line. Let's get her interviewed. And shortly after, the work was like flowing in, and we still had way too much, and we needed someone who was dedicated to work on all of the email marketing across brands. And that is how we found Skylar.
Yeah, and I was at the time had recently been relieved of duty from the position that I was at a company that was facing some legal issues, some money issues, and they were trying to cut costs and started dropping a couple of us. And I had been looking for a new position for a number of months at this point, freelance, contracted. At this point, I was looking for anything. I actually had started driving for a rideshare, started doing that just to pay bills, and I was reached out to through a recruiter and given this opportunity. I didn't even know it was for that company at the time. I was just like, oh, cool, yeah, this job seems great. So then the interview comes along, and I'm on a video conference, and they say the name of the company. I was like, oh, I know this company. So kind of just ended up working out for a good time. It was very very good timing. Beginning of the year, right when things started to drastically change for all of us. So I'm very thankful that I was able to earn that experience. So
Yeah, it was good timing, because when we were in the office at first, and for a while we were in the office, and then to have employment while the world blew up with COVID has been a really big blessing. But I want to kind of explore something we kind of all said, is that we worked in all these different companies as writers, but maybe someone who isn't working as a writer yet or is wondering how to find writing jobs, they might not think about the whole corporate vein. And every single one of these companies needs brand messaging and needs writers. There is so much under the surface content that has to be created. And it's one of the things I hope comes out of this episode is that is a lucrative way to work as a writer. You're not like creating your dream content, but you're having a lot of power in the messaging that you're creating for that brand, and it's valued and they pay for it.
Yeah, I think the company is a really good place to start a copywriting career because for the client-facing websites, it was intuitive. It was just, or at least for me, it came natural and prepared me for the secondary role for the internal communication side of it. And I think it is I don't want to say an easy role, an easy career to go into, but if you find writing natural, I think it is something that you can intuitively evolve into.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you have to be able to think on the spot, right? Like you have
Yeah.
to be quick. Go ahead, Laura.
I was just going to say, to second that, I started in customer service with another company and moved up to the communications role of a communications specialist. I didn't even have my degree at that point. I was in my 20s and it just came naturally. And, so I went from there and then eventually got my degree, but in journalism, but yeah, didn't start out writing at all.
You mentioned technical writing earlier, and it's funny because I passed a gig to Skylar because I sent it up to all y'all, but I was going to say, are you interested in this role? But you said you hated it.
No.
Technical writing was something I thought about when I was in college. I was like, it sounds cool, it sounds predictable, but it sounds structured and like something I'd be interested in. But it's a totally different skill set, and you're not having a conversation. You're just giving them instructions essentially. Whereas copywriting, you can have a conversation.
Right.
Yeah, it's more human. Copy is more. That's how I tell the difference between them. It's probably worthwhile going into a distinction between technical writing and copywriting and email marketing and all these different things. But the biggest learning curve I had with copy was brevity. You have to edit that crap down. I know my first week, one of the managers gave me an email and I missed the mark big time because it was like 10 times as long as it was supposed to be. And he said, it's been a while since we had an eloquent writer. He was so diplomatic and kind about it, but he's like, I need maybe 5% of this email. So
Oh,
I was like, whoa.
I'm sure you have it on the agenda, but that would be a good segue into the topic of people who aren't writers thinking they're writers.
Yeah, let's talk about it because that's what ultimately fucked us over. So, and I'll bleep the fuck out, but
If I can, I'll go ahead and start that because I've had experience with that from the beginning of my career. I started out in college very similar to Laura. I didn't know I was going to be a writer. I was going into journalism for a while, and that's kind of how I started my writing career. But right after I graduated, I came down to Jacksonville and went and worked for a political company. And I was a content writer creating mail-in ads and videos and stuff like that. And when you work for anyone, their voice is they're going to try to overtake yours no matter what, because they think that they know more than someone that has worked in the profession or someone straight out of college, either way. But when you work with politicians, it's like that tenfold because their views are above all else. They think they know what's right because they think they know if they've been elected before, they're like, this worked before. And you can try and explain like it doesn't matter if it worked before, things are changing. You need to understand that. They don't want to do that. So that was how I started my career in writing, of facing people that loved writing over the people they hired to do their work. So I definitely understand that. That experience has been overarching in every single one of my positions that I've had in writing.
I
yeah,
think we could all agree that when that happens, brevity is not a factor.
no.
People think writing well means writing a lot.
Yeah, and that's one of the first telltale signs that that they don't value the process because they think they can slap anything up there and they don't pay attention to how it's impacting other lines of copy or other products or other pages. They don't have the big picture in mind. They just throw it out.
Or
Another symptom of that is repeating the same word over and over and over. So, oh, it's grammatically correct. This is fine. Well, you said the same word 5 times in a paragraph. So,
or a person who's in sales um, that doesn't, I don't even know how to articulate this in a way that somebody that's in sales that knows a little bit about how to react to speak to somebody and to convince them to do something. So thinking in some instances, it's not a problem, but in others, not knowing what's appropriate for the content that you're trying to put out.
Yeah, or the brand
The
message
messaging.
or the audience, the intended
Yeah.
audience. Like
Yeah.
sales heavy copy isn't the same thing as conversational copy.
Right.
they don't read the room.
Right. You can't read the room sometimes. Or, throwing a message out for a shit ton of people, a lot of people, and, not having targeted messaging for your individual audiences and not doing that background as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
I had a boss early on in my career that told me that your biggest challenge is not going to be creating the content. It's going to be dealing with the people who have at some point in their lives written something, whether it was a paper for college, their thesis, something, and they want to make sure that there's every comma there. And they have this air of I know better than you and I've written before. And what they don't understand is that the same rules that you use to write your paper with the footnotes and the annotations is not the same, especially not when you're looking at writing for web. And that stuck with me for a long time and helped me navigate dealing with those people because
Yeah.
that's a whole nother show um, as well.
Yeah. Writing for the internet is a very specific thing. Not everyone can do it. And
Yeah.
if we're doing it well, we make it look easy, which can also be our
A gift and a curse. Yeah.
That's kind of the biggest misconception of the entire process anyway. It's that everyone looks at it and goes, "Well, why is it taking you so long to write X? Right? Why is it taking you 2 days to do such and such?" And it's like, what we do is we don't just write. We are translating a voice into a product that is going to be seen by hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people, depending on what you're creating. And by doing that, the only way to possibly like do it right is to take your time and really understand the brand, understand the product, understand who everyone you're speaking to is. And like they feel like it's just like, oh, these are the people, write it. And it's just that's the misconception with it, I think, to most people from like an outside perspective.
Yeah, this is what it does. So be direct and say it. Okay, now you sound like everyone else.
Yeah, exactly.
It's simple, but I try to think, is this something I would want to read when I write? But beyond that, the readability aspect of it, so it's just like, just because I understand this doesn't mean, a client or a potential client will, because the readability has to be broad. So I think it's something all of us have experience and frustration with.
And you should have time to put it down, like write it, put it aside, and then let it sit, and then come back to it with fresh eyes. Because if you're just grinding out work, you're going to make mistakes. It's not going to sound good, and then they think you can't write.
Yeah, that's what I appreciated about our sprints. Um, for the listeners, we did agile sprints on our team, and when we had a full week, each project was assigned story points. But when we had a full week to work with in that sprint, that gave us time to work on things simultaneously, come back to it, see it with fresh eyes, look at it in the big picture. How's it integrating with other things? Get approvals. There was a lot that went into each item, and then when they take that away or they stack it up, and then you got outside eyes, and then there's a beauty to agile. I really appreciated the time we spent on getting that figured out.
See, that was something that was actually very different to me going into the company. Because as I said, like when I first started writing, I worked for a political company, and that is not a we have a sprint, we have a week, whatever to work on things. It's you're getting an email, and the team of writers has to pick up whatever that piece is. If it's multiple pieces in that email or whatever, you have to put your name on it. You have to work on it, and you have to get it sent in that day. You are working at a daily speed, like you have to crank out pieces because you're working on all of these people's stuff. So transitioning from that to what I did at the company before this one was drastically different. It was closer to the agile kind of narrative, but like that was the hardest thing for me.
Well, and when you came in, they didn't really have the process figured out very well either.
Mhm.
We kind of did that over the course of the year.
Yeah.
I think the challenge with agile, while it works well, is technology based, right? So there are some nuances that don't necessarily work well with the type of works creatively that we do. However, it's like corralling the troops, right? You have this creative process that I'm sure we could all like draw out to way more than a week if we needed to for that whole creative process that you described. But it kind of gives us a container to work with so that or work in so that we know, okay, these things have to be done, but they have to be done in this timeline. And how do we squeeze the steps into that timeline? Because otherwise, as I'm sure all of you know, we could just keep spinning and spinning and spinning. So it worked well for us for sure.
While we're on that topic, I was thinking about we could probably all have a good bit to say about working with different people on a creative team and in sales. And we kind of hinted at it with people who aren't writers trying to write, but I think we all worked most closely with designers
Yeah,
and then stakeholders after that. But
we had great designers to work with. I appreciated that a lot. Working
Mhm.
simultaneously, making the words and design jive. That was the best it got.
Yeah, these were great designers. I had a designer who did not respect the writer and the writing process and the content strategy process at all. And but he was an older designer, came from um, old ad days where you like cut and paste and stuff. So, and I was a young person at the time. So he had absolutely no respect for what I needed to do to do my job to create whatever we were creating. He just didn't have that respect. And I see that a lot in you know, people that think that they can write, they don't have that respect for people that actually do the writing. And I think it's pervasive in all kinds of in all industries, in all areas, not just the company that we were in, but
Oh, Laura, I
things
learned something so good from you too. When we were still in the office and you were my cubicle buddy, um, we didn't do a lot of it at this company, but you would say a lot that in previous experiences, the writer determined what shape things took, and the designer worked from the messaging. Um, and that isn't something that I had I mean, I thought about it, but I hadn't, and we didn't do a lot of it. For a lot of us, our
Mhm,
template or our design was already kind of predetermined, and we had certain
mhm.
standards we had to hit. But it's interesting, and something I'm gonna take with me when we go into these new opportunities is being able to shape something with language first and
Yeah,
get it across.
and strategy of the page, your hierarchy of content
It
is important.
changes, yeah, it changes that whole process for you, honestly, because I had a very similar experience, Laura, where I was able to write first, and they would design around it based on ideas that I put forward, and we would work collaboratively on that aspect.
Yep.
And I feel like that process changed along the way a lot more to the point where it was towards the end of the time of the company. I feel like it became even more disjointed to the point where we would be seeing these completely finished designs, and we hadn't started on copy for a lot of processes, I've noticed.
Yeah.
And that really just like it hinders a lot of the messaging. It hinders the piece in general, and it doesn't make a cohesive piece. It just doesn't.
Yeah, the designer and the writer have to be on the same page. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, my experience was a little different. I came from a place that was working in Agile already, and we did just design sprints. And so in the design sprints, everyone was in the room. The designer, there was a developer, there was a writer, and we had all of the requirements for whatever this project was. So um, anything that we needed to know to start the project, so like whatever would be um, in a creative brief, we discussed and then worked and talked through. And so even though I was a writer, my job was to sketch out a page or what I thought the page should look like, right? First of all, I can't draw a circle, but I had to sketch a page with the designers, and of course, theirs looked way better. But what happened is because my lens as a writer is very different from the lens of a developer and a designer, there were things that they may not have considered, and vice versa. And that's where the creative process started. And so it wasn't like copy starts first and then passes it to design, because effectively that's not agile. Like everybody's working in tandem is what agile is, right? So that fostered that, and the communicate, like we didn't have a choice. I have to talk to you because now we have these, you're taking pieces from my stuff, I'm taking pieces from your stuff, and that's essentially how the page is going to look. It makes it easier to write to. It gives people a clear understanding of how the page works and what's the functionality in the beginning. And I think that there were issues with that process as well, but it worked well because everyone was informed at the same time with the same information.
Yeah, I had that with another place where, you work lockstep with your designer and you work out those issues together, like, okay, my copy, your design is not working, let's revise. And then the finished product was then delivered for approval. It wasn't like copy approved, then design approved, and then,
Like assembly
the whole
line.
thing put together approved again.
Yep, they call that the waterfall methodology.
Yeah, which we kind of were doing. It was weird.
The waterfall for sure.
Yeah.
And it kind of negated the UX, like it separated them, it siloed them away. I really like when you were talking, I was imagining, well, like if the UX team was in there, then you're going to design it from the ground up to be a good user experience. You got the head.
Yeah, at the company, UX was definitely siloed, and they kind of had their own stuff. And I don't think that they were like, before they had a full team, they had one UX person who did all the research and all of the, she played the UX person from she played several roles, one person. And I feel like the company was not in a place to accept and understand her skill set, and so they kind of didn't take her advice, right? They kind of like, and then if we would have worked from the premise that she was trying to set up, I feel like we would have been more successful moving forward with the work that we were doing.
Every meeting she was in, she brought hard facts to the table, and I felt confident when we were working directly with her, especially when someone who just had a gut feeling or an opinion about something that may work shot down her research. I'm like, she spent time doing this. She's actually speaking to customers. She's testing. This is going to work. Like it's tested. It's going to work. Versus your gut feeling about, let's try this out. Let's see how it works.
Or that off the cuff thing they would do in design reviews. Like UX actually has data and research behind it. There's real information there. And then we get in those reviews, and then you've got like 10 cooks in the kitchen, and none of them are the writers, and they all want to change it. And that was challenging, really challenging.
I was going to say earlier about working directly with designers in tandem. Some of the best concepts we had were when I first started on the team, and we brainstormed after knowing in advance what was expected of us. And there was a plan we followed, and we would crank out like 10 concepts and then narrow those down to a few, present those to stakeholders, narrow them down further. And that was great, knowing upfront what's expected, then working directly with the designer throughout the process, tossing out ideas instead of working either isolated or having to listen to people outside of the writing world tell you what to do.
That's kind of what my first experience was. It was a lot more of like we've been talking about, like direct connection with the design, and we would create a concept. We would be like, okay, this piece is going to be about this. That's what we're going to write to. They would design it, no matter what. It would only be reviewed by one other person at that point. And then we would send it to the client after it was done, and that was it. If they wanted to redo it, that's fine. But that was it. It was done at that point. We didn't have those 5 or 10 voices all going, well, what about this? What about this? What about this? It was very much just like we're going to show them our idea. If they don't like it, okay, then we fix it. We don't try to go over it before we even get to that point. And that was something that was the biggest change for me at the company, was having all those voices speak over you.
Too many cooks is a recipe for disaster.
Exactly.
And
Very good, Tyler.
yeah. And Skylar, you worked for an agency, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I was working at an agency.
See, I think there's a big difference between working for an agency versus working for an internal client or your in-house agency, because you're contracted to deliver certain product, and you got maybe you have 3 changes before you're being paid. Start paying for changes. Whereas inside, an internal creative department, you don't have that.
I was going to say, congrats on the book. I saw that on LinkedIn, which I guess segues to the job search.
Yeah, let's talk about how to find copywriting work.
How have y'all experienced it differently now in the time of COVID versus before? What differences are there?
I like having the recruiter working like for us at the same time. Like that's double duty. That's helpful. She's in our interest.
Yeah.
Is it the recruiter who you were?
Who brought us all into the company?
Oh, okay, cool.
She's looking for work for
Well,
us while we're looking.
Mine is a different person now, but yes, same.
Yeah, we all have the same nuance.
Yeah. Okay, just making sure.
Right. We all got transferred.
Yeah.
Because the original recruiter left.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. She left the company. I think she went to go work somewhere else. I don't really remember.
For a major publisher.
But
Yeah.
LinkedIn Premium has been a really great way to find jobs to apply for.
Yeah.
I think probably the most successful of all the ways you can find gigs.
It's incredible. They're good. They're doing a free trial. I accidentally got the free trial for the business premium, and I canceled it immediately because I saw it goes up to like $60 a month, and it's 4 businesses. But that was the default selected one, bad UX, and I just clicked the first button, and then later that day I was like, no, I'm not a business. I'm not going to pay $60 a month to find jobs. So I downgraded to the personal version, but it's great. Like seeing jobs you're qualified for, seeing how you match up against other applicants, how many applicants there are. It's amazing. I used ZipRecruiter for that one gig that I have an interview for next week, which I'm curious about in person.
What's that, Laura?
We all like applied, I think. I'm not going. I'm not.
I don't blame you. I kind of I didn't apply until you said, did anyone apply for it? I was like, I probably should. So I did, and it doesn't sound kosher, but it's in person, so I'm a bit hesitant. But I'm hoping I hear back from this other gig before then, so I can cancel that. But ZipRecruiter, I've barely used it, but the feature that notifies you when someone looks at your application is pretty cool too. Like I've never seen that on the job search app. It's like notification. Someone looked at your resume. Someone looked at your application again.
It's false hope, man.
Yeah, you're right.
But it's
Well,
still hope. I
I'm
mean,
a
like, I'll
little
take the goals. That's good.
I'm jaded, I think, but
I was gonna say I'm in a little bit of a different situation, and I'm still trying to figure out if who got the short end of the stick, right? What I will say is, I am always looking, right?
Have
Um,
to.
Hmm.
I can't help it. I just need to see what's out there. I guess my go-to places are definitely Indeed and
mhm.
LinkedIn.
Mhm.
I like the feature on LinkedIn where you can open your profile to recruiters and not have, let's say, your current employer know that you're searching, right? The other thing that's pretty surprising to me, I'd say I have been in writing to some degree since I got out of college. My first internship in high school was for writing, right, in a PR firm. So I'm not gonna say how many years, but it's more than I'd say almost more than 20 years, right? Um, the idea that people are now recognizing writing as a specific role and that there are variants to that role is
Mhm.
amazing to me because when I think about like when I got out of college and even 10 years ago, when I think about going on some of these search places looking for jobs, there was not a role that you could find that was only a writer, right? Like I was lumped into all these other things. And it was very um, concerning for me because I'm like, I don't want to work with wet spreadsheets and that's not my thing, right? So now that we are being specialized or recognized as a specialized role and there are specialties within the specialty, it makes my heart sing.
Yeah.
And it makes us more sane because we don't have to do all the things. We can hone
Mhm.
in on the thing that we're most effective at. And yeah, good. I mean, I don't want to, I appreciated when the company brought on ebooks. They weren't asking us to create web page copy and ebook copy at the same time. There were different
I'm a
tools.
web writer only. I love the web. I could not imagine writing an ebook or a case study. That to me is not a happy place. But for the job search, the other thing that I wanted to say is when you think about what you're looking for in a role, don't think about it from the perspective of copywriter or content creator. Think about it from the perspective of people who don't really know what you do and how they would term that job, right? Um, I know in the beginning I would put in copywriter, UX writer, UX, but then you have to think about like digital content. There are so many variants, or sometimes just put in like a skill set, right?
Right.
And use that as your search. I think people get pigeonholed or don't get a full availability of what's on the market because let's say they only put copywriter in, right? So definitely use those search terms to your advantage.
Mhm.
I experienced that recently with remote because I was only looking at local jobs, and I don't know why it didn't occur to me to start using the remote function on LinkedIn, but I think there are two ways you can do it. You can do it as a search term or as the location. I think Indeed has it too, but it just opened up a ton of new roles.
And better paying roles because if you can get a writing job in a major city and work from home, you will get paid better. They have higher salary.
Yeah, that's the one I found through Indeed, and I'm hoping I get. It's a senior role, which I'm just like,
You're ready for that.
no,
You are ready for that.
I'm still a junior, but I was like, all right,
Tyler,
made
you've
it to the
grown
next round.
so much this year. I don't even want to hear that. I think you're one of the brightest copywriters I know. You
Thank
are,
you.
and you can handle yourself in a high stakes meeting.
Can I just say I need to echo that? I don't know, and Tyler, I feel like I told you often. Like I feel like we're light years from when I met you to like now. When I first met Tyler, he was like really quiet, really like timid. He didn't say much. He was really hard to read. And I was like, oh my gosh, we were polar opposites, right? And I was like, this is going to be the hardest task for me to crack that shell. I was like, I can't, I don't, I mean, he was very helpful always, but it was like, what about this? Gave me the answer, and that was it. And I was like, okay, we are going to have to be like, shoulder to shoulder in this. I'm gonna need you to. And for a minute, it was like really rough, and I'm like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. Like, this is not gonna work. And I'm getting pressure to like build a team, and I'm like, if I can't like build the rapport with Tyler, like anyone who comes after him is going to be a challenge. Like, you're gonna see the difference, right? And I think at one point I was just so frustrated, like I don't know what else to do, right? Because anything I threw at Tyler, he was like, "No, I'm not." He was dodging anything, like, "No, no, thank you. I'm not trying to hear you, chick." And then one day, I remember this vividly. We sat down. I was like, "I'm just gonna have to talk to him," and I felt like I needed to handle it with kid gloves, but you guys know me. That's not my personality, right? So I'm like, I don't really know. I'm just gonna come straight. So we had a conversation, and I was like, listen, whatever it is that you think this is, it's not. Like, I need you to be you, and I have to be me, and we have to work as a team. Oh, this will not work. And I'm like, I am a straight shooter. Ask me, I'm gonna tell you. Like, might not like the answer, but I'm gonna tell you. And I would hope that you would do the same for me. And for me, from that day on to now, the Tyler that we have in front of us versus the Tyler that I first met is like 180. So, and it showed in your work, and everybody like recognized it. So
The whole team did.
I'm thrilled.
Yeah.
I have to,
Go ahead.
thank y'all both so much, especially Yukita. I have to say I was a bit shell shocked from the previous senior writer at the company, which you've heard horror stories about, because he didn't trust my writing. He shot down objectively good ideas, and when your superior doesn't trust you, no one else will. Like, no one else on the team, designers aren't going to, stakeholders aren't, creative directors aren't. They're going to hear it from the person you're answering to, and then you don't have a chance. So yeah, I was a bit traumatized from that initial role, because that was my first real copywriting role, and feeling like I wasn't good enough. Kind of I had that residual feeling of failure for a while, and it was intimidating. I'm like, I guess I'm not a good writer, because these ideas I thought were great got shot down and scrapped. So yeah, I'm definitely a lot more confident, and working under you has taught me a lot. It's still, I think I feel like I can't be a senior writer yet, because I've seen how much you take on, and I'm like, I don't want to do all that yet.
Tyler, you brought up a really good point about confidence in writing, and knowing if you're not confident in what you're doing, right? Then the person, no matter, because you're always, as a writer, going to have somebody that's going to say, oh, no, because it's so subjective, right? And unless it follows the creative brief, or unless it goes up beyond the creative brief and doesn't even touch what the creative brief requires, then you're not going to be able to meet that goal, right? But if you have the confidence to say, hey, this is in the creative brief, this is what was asked for, then really there is no naysaying of what you've produced.
Yeah. And again, to Kita, you having confidence in all of us and letting us have relatively free reign over our work was just, it's amazing. Like, that's necessary, I think, to know that when you write something, it's going to go to the next level. Like, it's not going to get stopped. It's not going to stop at you and get sent back to the drawing board. That if you're confident about it, there's a good chance it's going to be produced.
It's important, and I learned early on in my management career is like, you can't control everything. There will be some things that you have to step in and like say, hey, we have to do it this way or whatever. But you have to trust yourself. And thankfully, I had the opportunity to, on my own, hire all of you. I didn't really have any say on it, right? So at that point, if I am trying to micromanage each one of you, then that means that I didn't do a good job of the hiring, right? And then there's that saying that if your people aren't looking good, then you don't look good, right? You hire a team that you know can do the work and be effective so that you can step away and do some of the mundane, boring management stuff that you've been put in place to do. I think it was definitely a learning experience for me, and I think that it's very important. You hear all these ideas about diversity and inclusion, and you think, oh, this is about female or this is about race. This was a good teachable moment for me in diversity and dealing with different personalities, right? And I managed teams in different countries, but when you have someone whose personality is so very different than, let's say, everyone on your team or everyone that you ever dealt with, you have to be creative in how you deal with them, and you have to be creative in how you internalize what you're getting from them, right? And I think that that's really important, because that is a key role in copywriting. Like, you have so many personalities that you have to deal with, and getting information from so many people. Like, you have to pull out the important parts and let go of everything else.
So somebody has to tell the story of how we became the copycats.
I feel like you guys were the copycats before I got there, to be honest. But
I think Tyler, didn't you create the group or something and call it the Copycat?
Yeah, I didn't know there was a history to it. I thought it was just like a spontaneous.
So I have to tell the story. Am I the only one that remembers it?
Sounds like it, yeah.
Apparently.
Sorry.
I mean, if you mean the IKEA trip, but I thought it was before that.
It was the IKEA trip, because the
Oh,
IKEA trip
that.
and the Slack channel happened at the same time. Same
Oh.
day.
Did?
It
It
did.
did?
Within a day of each other. We were in the conference room. We had to name ourselves something, but we named ourselves that because of the IKEA trip.
I thought the
Well,
channel
because
came
we all
first.
had cats?
Who came first here?
Was it the cats that we all had?
It was, yes,
Orange
tell the story, because they don't know. And we
Hey,
only have a couple minutes.
I feel like the copycats was already in place when you got here, and the reason we did it was because we were doing alliteration, and people were at the time making, like, there was like the Goonies and the this, and Tyler. I was like, Tyler, come up with something. And I
Yeah,
don't know. I like alliteration.
that was it. That was the, yeah.
That was it. And then when
Yeah.
did
I
the
think-
IKEA trip happen?
I think it was more along the lines of that was created, and then like fate kind of took over.
Yeah.
Because as like you guys were kind of forming this team, and I came in, and I remember I don't know if it was my first day or my second day or whatever it was. We all got together, and you guys were like, "We're gonna go take a lunch, and we're going to IKEA," and I was like, "All right, that's different." Yeah, I was literally like, "That's different. Okay." So we all walk over there, and we're walking around, and we're just talking as we're walking, and we figure out that 4 of us all have orange cats, all of different sizes and shapes. And we all pull our phones out and we show each other the photos, and there's a photo of all of our cats, except for Kita.
Keita, didn't you have to
But-
use like Garfield or Heathcliff?
Garfield or
Little
Heathcliff.
Remy.
Yes.
Remy will be on YouTube.
Oh.
That's awesome.
Yep.
Yeah, Howard's not in here. Oh, look at his little feet, his little cat paws. He misses us. Look, he misses our faces.
Aw.
All right, we're gonna have a rendezvous catch up with the copycats.
Yes, we will.
At some
With
point.
cocktails.
Yes.
Cocktails and copycats.
Always.
Yes.
Copycats and cocktails.
Alliteration
Yes.
for the win.
How about those copycats? That was so much fun. All of these interviews are turning out so much fun. I miss them. I miss having brainstorm buddies at the ready. Reach over and ask for an opinion, or when you can't quite hear something objectively and you need to bounce it off somebody. But you know what? Writers' rooms and collaborative buddies, they don't need corporations to bring them together. You can find a writing tribe. They're all over the place. They're on Instagram. They're on Facebook. They're under hashtags. Find a tribe. Get other writers in your life. So, if you're interested in the companion guide, it's on Amazon. It pairs with this episode, but both of them can be standalone. I hope you get a lot of value from the book, where it definitely dives into content there's no time to do on this show. All right, the winner of the giveaway is Vanessa Writes. She's on Instagram. It's Vanessa Writes. So I will be messaging you to see how I can get you a copy of this book. Thank you for your support in this project. Appreciate you. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Right on, people. I can't resist that pun. I need a different sign off, but I love it. I love it so much.